Okay, so we're going to dig in here. Good evening again. Tonight's topic is on determination and resolve from a Buddhist perspective, which is different than the conventional meaning of determination, which we'll explore. So I think this is an eminently important and practical question because you see some people face serious challenges and despite that continue to persevere and thrive. While others collapse, they give up or quit. And why do challenges break some people? They're never the same after certain kinds of challenges, and it results in other people actually being stronger and more resilient. And this seems to me to be particularly important as we begin to age, when you're facing just the realities of slowly losing mobility, impairment, injury, facing limitations, and kind of the hidden one that sneaks up on you is actually a sense of your change of identity in relationship to all these changes that are taking place in your body and your mind. So from a Buddhist perspective, resolve or determination is considered to be a special quality of mind and heart. It's one of the paramis or perfections. It's considered a precondition or an essential tool for developing and maturing a practice and for awakening. And in a general sense, it's referring to a consistent, steady, stable focus, both in practice and living, which is consistent with the psychology, the teachings, and the methods of the historical Buddha for the benefit of oneself and for others. But in a more specific sense, it's the steady focus and application of the teachings, the psychology, and the methods to a particular goal or the development of a particular quality of mind, generosity, kindness, whatever it may be. So traditionally, resolve or determination is considered to be grounded in right view, discernment, clear seeing, kindness, and compassion. And it starts with right view, and I gave a talk on right view in this regard several weeks or months ago here at Mountain Stream. So I want to stress that the distinguishing feature from a Buddhist perspective of resolve or determination is a resolute or determined action which is guided by an aspiration or an intention to practice, live, and act as an expression of wisdom, kindness, and compassion. And this link between an aspiration and an intention to practice and live and act in a certain way as an expression of the Dharma is the key link. If that link is not there, it's just determined effort to do something. It is not a pyramid because it's not grounded in a right view and right action. So to try to tease out a little bit the difference between a conventional mindset.
Could you repeat that? Could you repeat that? Couldn't repeat that last part, like the last 1 minute.
Sure. So the distinguishing feature of resolve or determination from a Buddhist perspective is that it is a resolute or determined action which is guided by an aspiration and an intention to practice and live and act in a particular way as an expression of the Dharma. And traditionally, this linkage to intention and right view is considered critical. If the action is not linked to right intention and right aspiration, it's not considered a pyramid because it's not coming from a place of right view or right action. So does that help? Yes? No? So whoever asked the question, does that make it clear?
Sorry, I thought you could see me. I was giving you a thumbs up. Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, all right. So to try to tease this out a little bit from the conventional definition is I was watching a program the other day, and it was kind of a close-up on two boxers. And they're these young guys, I don't know, they're late 20s or early 30s, and they're, extraordinary physical specimens. They're both undefeated. They're considered to be like in the world, just at the top of their game. And one is Harold Spence Jr., who comes off as this very, really thoughtful young man. And the other one is named Lawrence Crawford. And so this is showing them working out, and you get to meet their families, and they're interviewed. And so Spence, who's the one who comes off as being so thoughtful and quiet in his speech and everything, they ask him about, well, in the end, what's this all about? And he says, well, at the end of the month, the two of us are going to get in the ring, and he's going to try to destroy me, and I'm going to just try to destroy him, and we'll see who breaks first. So that is one definition of kind of extraordinary determination. And it's based in a sense of separation and self and craving and clinging and identification and force. So as extraordinary and athletically fantastic as it might be, from a Buddhist perspective, it clouds vision and distorts perception about the nature of suffering and harming oneself and harming others. And this is probably, and I happen to like these two guys. I'm not much of a boxing buff, but I admire two young men who come from where they've come from and done what they've done. It's really something. And Spence's trainer, by the way, is a Mahayana Buddhist, and envisions in his mind that he's fulfilling the Bodhisattva vow by training and caring for Harold Spence. So, there's a lot of different ways that people understand these teachings, but the idea that you're going to be causing yourself the kind of punishment that's involved here, and the objective is to actually hurt someone else, clearly puts this outside the realm of, a Buddhist perspective. And, in a way, this is maybe a cheap shot, but I don't think it is, because I think most of us do something like this at some point in our life, that we want something, or we don't want something, or we're a perfectionist, so that we criticize ourselves and judge ourselves and punish ourselves for the purpose of being determined to reach some kind of particular goal. Sometimes we don't even know what it is. So the thing that really distinguishes Buddhist resolve is that it is always alert and watching for a pathway to live consistent with the teachings. So it's always wholesome. It's always connected with right intention and right view. So if we find ourselves being quite determined and quite resolute in trying to accomplish something or convince someone else of something else, and we find that we're suffering while we're doing that, then the thing to look for is, are we connected with an intention and a view which is consistent with the teachings, and trying to point our mind into some sense of satisfaction and kindness and caring, or is it pushing our mind into confusion, doubt, and struggle? So I'd like to try to apply this directly, this idea that there's this is linked with aspiration and intention, and then the methods of Buddhist practice. And the way I'd like to do that is just talk briefly about this experience that I had of breaking my back in 5 places and a couple of ribs. And the last time I was here, or the time before, I spoke a little bit about that. And as I recall, I focused on when the event happened and being paralyzed for a while and not being able to talk and not being able to move. And then the hospital experience that I had for several days was maybe the most difficult experience that I've had in my adult life. It was the combination of the misery and pain, and then some of the treatment that I received in the hospital, which I thought was deficient, really made it miserable. So what I'd like to do is focus on when I got home. So when I got home, I was so happy to be home. You know, I had broken 5 vertebrae. By this time, I had really realized the extent of my injury and the challenge that I was facing. And the outcome at that point was unclear. No one was giving me any clear indication of what I could expect. They kept saying that in a week or 10 days that they would confer with me and we would go over all of the images, and we would talk through prognosis. So my son-in-law picked me up. We get home. You know, he kind of gets me situated on my couch, and he takes off. And so it's just me and my little Cairn Terrier, Kenobi. And the Tim, my son-in-law, had put the changer for the TV, the station changer, on the right-hand side of the couch that I was on, and where the ribs that were broken were on my right-hand side. So I'm sitting on the couch, so happy to be home, and I reach over to get the control, and the next thing I know is I'm waking up from having blacked out. So the pain was so intense of just reaching across to get that, I blacked out. So I was having that experience for the first several days at home, in the bathroom, getting in and out of bed. It was nearly impossible to sleep because I just couldn't find a position where the pain wouldn't wake me up. And then I started going into sleep deprivation. I already had a lot of that due to the experience I had in the hospital. But I would say the first week and a half being home was just this kind of extraordinary experience, because just getting out of bed was a whole production to figure out how to get out of bed by myself. And then to just do the simplest things, brush your teeth, comb your hair a little bit, walk into the kitchen and not be concerned about losing your balance, fixing a cup of coffee. They told me that I couldn't lift anything more than 5 pounds. And that was an exaggeration. There's a Coffee Mate product that I like. And there's a container, and I don't know, the container is a pound and a half, 2 pounds. I couldn't even lift that. So it would take me about 90 minutes just to get going to the point in the morning where I had gotten out of bed, put my clothes on, had a cup of coffee, and was exhausted enough to sit down on the couch in the front room. And so it became really clear to me that anxiousness, potential depression, the pain, sleep deprivation, that I was really facing a potential mix of mind state and physical conditions that cumulatively could really take me to a bad place. So I really, the idea at that point, that this whole combination of sleep deprivation and the pain and the inability to move and not be concerned that you were going to be close to blacking out, made most of what we normally consider like meditation nearly impossible. It was just the mix of misery and everything was so dense that I couldn't mobilize sufficient energy to be able to focus my mind in the way that we normally think of focusing your mind in meditation. But I did have a clarity from the fall and when I was in the hospital that I really needed to mobilize the assets of my body and my mind and my practice to deal with all of this. And my thought was, and this is what came to me quite clearly in the hospital, was that in addition to dealing with the present moment, that this was really training for the future. And I've always considered the story about the beginning of the historical Buddhist practice not to be just a nice story or a metaphor, but like actually a model. And and to recall that as a young man in his late 20s, he saw a person who was old, who was sick and had died. And the existential nature of that really struck him quite strongly. And then he saw a mendicant, a monk, who in the face of all of this was calm and tranquil. And he referred to those four: old age, sickness, death, and the equanimity of the mendicant as the four heavenly messengers. So I really saw that, first of all, I was facing this enormous challenge and I didn't know the outcome. And that this whole experience had a lot to do with where I was heading in my life at this age in my life. And so bringing some real clarity to how I was going to try to do this from a dharmic perspective seemed quite important to me. And this is going to look differently for every person. This is where in my opinion, the creativity in practice comes from, where each of us find in our own lives and the challenges and circumstances of our life that we frame how we take the Dharma and use it. So I'm just trying to share with you what I did in this particular situation, and I'm continuing to do, and that it's really serving me well. So starting with aspiration and the idea that for determination and resolve to be a parami, it has to be connected with a wholesome aspiration. I had a very clear aspiration that regardless of what the outcome here was, even if to some degree I was going to be disabled, that I wanted to figure out how to live a life that was as full and as satisfying as possible. And I was determined that I was not going to allow this accident to ruin the last chapter of my life. Particularly, my grandson Koa plays this oversized, king-size role in my life, and I've worked very, very hard to get in really good physical conditions so that I can keep up with him and play with him and do athletic things with him. He just turned 10, so it's a challenge. But my aspiration is to really live a full and satisfying life consistent with the Dharma. And my intention was to use the Dharma, and in particular, to see as clearly as I could, to bring all the resources of practice, so that I could see as clearly as possible and discover in any given moment, particularly of this rehab process, of both the limitations and, more importantly, the possibilities. Because the function of seeing clearly is purposeful. It's not just to see clearly, it's to see clearly so that we can actually see the limitations and possibilities in our lives, so we can make a choice, a skillful choice. And so my goal is that to use the practice of staying in the present moment, focusing on limits and possibilities, to discover insight, the most helpful path of action in any given moment. And so that's what I was determined to do. And as a practical method, very much like the method that we use in meditation, but here it was extremely active and happening all day long. I mean, if just to stand up, to sit down, to go into the bathroom, to get out of bed, what I was looking for is to find out what was possible. And so, I immediately found that my mind started creating all of these stories and scenarios and doubts and confusions, and telling me that I could not do certain things, or that I shouldn't try to do certain things. And so my attitude on this was to, rather than to listen to speculative thought or fear or doubt, papancha, was to actually realistically, carefully, but aggressively find out what I was capable and not capable of doing. So just the simplest things of rolling over in bed, at the beginning, that was like a huge production. And trying to roll the way that I would normally roll was just impossible. The pain was so great. But that didn't stop me from not trying to do that. I would prop my hands and then move to a edge, a place where there was doubt in my mind, or pain was starting. And then I really watched is what happening is that fear or doubt or anxiety preventing further movement, or is it actually the limitation that's in the body at that moment? And so just constantly doing that and finding out through exploration what the limits of that particular day or that particular morning were, and then discovering what I was capable of. And just by slowly doing that day by day, event by event, I could see that my capacity to handle things was slowly expanding. And I think the exciting part about this, and I mean, we've all heard this, but being in kind of a dramatic situation like this, the intensity of it really helps focus your mind, is that I could really see that by fully committing to this idea that the key to my recovery and to my finding out what was possible and to living a satisfying life within whatever the conditions were, was discovery, was exploration and insight. It changed my relationship with what seemed like a disability, what felt like pain, as from something that I had to overcome to something that I needed to understand and needed to work with. And so I was attached in a positive way to finding the best possible outcome through discovery of limitations and possibilities, but not attached to a particular method of doing that or a particular outcome. And what that allowed my mind to do during this very intense period, and it's continuing to allow it to do, is that it frees the mind up to collaborate with the way things actually are in your life, to partner with life as it is. So, one illustration of that would be um, particularly for the first, I would say, I don't know, 30 days, just finding out a situation where I could sit without relatively intense pain and sit in a way that would allow me to have sufficient energy to mobilize to meditate was an entire project. But what I did not do was set a goal that I had to be at a certain level of comfort or a certain level of pain relief. It was very clear to me that, like, some days I'd wake up and I would start to get out of bed, and kind of the reaction of my mind was, my major job today is going to be figuring out how to get out of bed. And just extraordinary. And then other days it was like, okay, this is going to be the normal production. It's going to take me 90 minutes, but now I'm learning how to regulate my energy and learning how to relate to this without resistance. So I'm starting to be able to relax into the experience and actually find satisfaction in making very small discoveries, very small steps, very small lessons, but cumulatively, being able to really see movement forward. And, having a clarity of what my aspiration was, what my intention was, and that the primary focus of my effort would be on discovery, really helped me to mobilize all my resources, what the historical Buddha calls arousing energy. And one of the extraordinary parts about this is that by focusing down in this way and having a very clear, wholesome objective, that it helps you accept the conditions that you're in, even if you don't want to be there. And that acceptance and then the exploration releases all of the energy that previously was going into fear and doubt and anxiety and speculative thought. And the amount of energy that's going into that, even though you don't know it, is significant. So suddenly you find that you have all this energy to work with that you didn't have before. So that was a huge realization for me, is the relationship between acceptance and energy. And then the other thing is that by focusing all of your attention and really committing to an understanding from a Buddhist perspective that the whole ball game is exploration, we call it investigation, and discovery, we call that insight, that it's the whole game. And all the other tools are to support that. So once you start doing that, and you're looking in any given moment for what are the limits, but more importantly, what are the possibilities, and not being tied to a particular outcome, your mind starts to become more flexible and adaptable, and making small adjustments over and over and over again, which, when all lined up together, end up being quite large, so that your way of engaging difficulty and challenge becomes much more flexible, adaptable, and you suddenly have more energy for it. So that staying connected with the aspiration and the intention, I found, was critical. And is there a question?
Tired.
Did you say something, Robin? Okay, so Andrew, do you have your hand up? No. Okay, so I've got maybe another 5 minutes and then we'll open it up, okay? So, I found that the effort to stay focused was, of course, huge, and the major obstacle was speculative negative thought. Uncertain about what's going on, fear about the scope of the injury, to the degree I would be able to recover. And so some of the things that really helped when you try to come back, and that's not enough. When you reflect on your intention and aspiration, and that's not enough. I would do a body scan, but I modified it so the body scan was to focus on everything that was all right with my body. And while I may have had like very intense pain on my right side and numbness in the middle of my back, my feet were okay, my calves were okay, my hips were okay, my head was fine, my hands were okay, and it would change the context of how I was holding the experience and the injuries that I was dealing with. And then I would practice gratefulness in that connection as well. And then frequently, I just got so exhausted that I would use supportive or inspirational materials, movies, literature, poems, supportive friends, many of them on dharmic topics to keep my spirits up. So in closing, what I'd like to say is that I think the last time I was here, I closed with this quotation from Thomas Merton, where he says, "There is no spiritual life apart from daily life." And I really feel that that's one of the big lessons for me coming out of this. Having this injury is the last thing I'd ever want, and having had it, it's like a real gift, because it's shown me that if you're willing to really devote yourself to the life that you have on a daily basis, that it can really pump up your practice. And in some regards, it's been kind of an inspiration for me, because I feel that it has really helped my body and my mind recover. So I think it's helpful sometimes to have some kind of an image or a model of what determination looks like. So I'd like to close with a poem that I wrote in December of 2004. And I was in Honolulu, Hawaii. I was staying at the New Otani Hotel, which is on the far side of the big beach in downtown Honolulu, and it's in a residential area. It's the only commercial property in a residential area. It's got a small little beach with virtually almost everybody who goes there is a local. That's the reason I like it. So, and Diamond Head is right behind the hotel. So that's the setting for this poem. She is standing on the beach in her form-fitting yellow and red top and her black knee-high surfing pants when I see her 5 stories below. The morning sun, just appearing over Diamond Head Crater, is shining on her black hair and Asian features. At first, part of what defines her life is almost unnoticeable, but as she moves, the 2 canes that allow her to stay upright and balanced come into view. She slowly inches forward towards the ocean, one deliberate step at a time, her paralyzed legs and stiff ankles rotating with each movement of her hips. She enters the water, rolling onto her back, collecting her long hair in a white bathing cap, tethering the walking canes with a black cord to her left ankle. She floats for a moment, suspended in seawater, looking into the blue sky and moving clouds, set free from the disabling pull of gravity. She rolls back onto her stomach and begins to rhythmically undulate like a dolphin, gliding through the ocean water. Her legs and feet follow behind her like the tail of a mermaid. She swims the 100 yards to the windsock distance marker and back, alternating between the dolphin-like rhythm, freestyle, and backstroke, always relying on the power of her upper body. She enters the shallow waters again at the edge of the beach, struggling to stand with the help of her canes, returning to the realities of paralysis and her land-bound life. As she slowly makes her way through the sand to the beachfront shower and to her waiting van, taking each small step with great care and attention. I wonder at the beauty and the mystery of the spirit that expresses itself through her determination and her movement. I am awed by her act of living the life she has been given, one step, one moment at a time. So for me, I would watch her every morning, and it's so inspirational. And I eventually tracked her down and met her, and she's a fascinating person. At that point, she was a student and an activist and became a professor, and quite an inspiration. So that's what I have to say. I think we've got just a couple of minutes for comments, questions.
Dennis, this is Marcia.
Yeah. Good evening.
Hi. Hi. So really appreciate your sharing this evening. Very, very powerful, your story, very powerful. And I was wondering if you see the pain, the physical pain and the determination that and the ways that you worked with that pain can be also applied to any kind of particular challenge, especially emotional pain or grief or, loss and all of the things that, were identified by the Buddha and seeing old age, sickness, and death. So your story really outlines specifically the type of focus. So that physical body brings that focus, but when you're in an emotional or distraught loss or grief, it's a different quality of mind. And I was wondering how you would talk about approaching it with that kind of determination the way that you worked with your physical pain.
Yeah. Well, I think this kind of matrix that's traditionally talked about of an aspiration and intention and then a direct application, that's the method or the means, is helpful in the sense of it's so easy to get lost, to get confused when there's anxiety, depression, intense emotional states. And I think I was fortunate in this case because although the pain was quite intense and dramatic, I actually saw the challenge as mental and emotional, really not the pain. I found that focusing on the pain and trying to manage that actually made it worse. And that if I focused on the relationship of my mind with the physical condition, that changed the entire dynamic, this idea of rather than trying to overcome something, trying to collaborate with it. So that model for me, historically has been the model that I've learned and has worked for me. And I think it's the same model that you bring to any form of suffering, but then, you use a different set of tools. I think trying to find avenues to open up the mind and make it spacious so you change the context for depression and anxiety, for example, is really critical. Kindness and compassion, support of other people. So I think it's going to, we hear all these Dharma talks, and it's easy to kind of get the idea that there's a cookie cutter approach to, this state of mind. And my own experience in my life, and then working with a lot of people one-on-one, is that yes, there are these fundamentals. I mean, there is this matrix, and there are things that are traditionally considered antidotes for certain states of mind. But beyond that, in terms of day-to-day life, each of us have to figure out, well, what are the tools that we have developed in our practices that we can call on? Because it's great to say, we'll do X, but if you haven't developed that skill set and somebody tells you to do that, it's going to make you worse. It's going to make you frustrated and more anxious and doubting yourself because somebody told you you should do this and you can't do it. And so I think realism for the community practitioner is the starting place for everything, because all of us have gone through a different developmental process with the Dharma. And so somebody's going to have like really strong concentration skills, particularly like, let's say that their primary practice has been metta. Well, they may have a much stronger concentration ability to stabilize and tranquilize their mind than somebody who hasn't done that work. Okay. Or another person that they focus very, very, very heavily on the wisdom piece, exploration, discovery, insight, choice, but they haven't emphasized the concentration practice so much. So you have to know yourself as a personality, and you have to know yourself as a practitioner, and then build that into these structures to help us deal with things. Does that help, Marcia?
I think it's very helpful. Thank you. Very, very helpful. Appreciate it.
Okay.
I just wanted to make a comment really quick that I listened to by accident, the biography of Ajahn Chah last night. And it was like a quick, he said, the monk, I don't even know if I could re-find it. It was on YouTube, but I would like to re-find it. But he said that Ajahn Chah loved to experiment, with this or that. And he used to do 3-month meditations with his disciples. It sounded like, if I got the years right, from the time he was born, he must have been only 35 years old, and they were doing like 3-month stints of not sleeping all night. And he also was doing 3 months of meditating, sitting meditation without sleep, and also without movement. And so for some reason, you listening to your story, and then just listening to, like, here I'm coming in and starting to practice now. And I was cleaning my landlord's house a little while ago, and she said her husband's, in surgery and this and that, blah, blah, blah. And he's in Eschaton, which is like a care place, and this and that. And I thought about this Ajahn Chah, just sounds like he would just like, let's just try it. Let's just stay up for 3 months and sit still and not move. Anyways, in the middle of the night. And then I don't know if they slept in the day, but anyway, so I said, well, how are you doing under the pressure of your husband having this surgery and what he's going through and being in Eschaton? And she said, I'm from the Midwest. We just deal with it. And I thought about my own upbringing, and my mother was very hysterical. And I thought to myself about your teachings, of how I'm trying to repattern right now. And I'm really trying to not go into what I went into last year. And so it was an inspiring talk. And so I just wanted to comment that, the Ajahn Chah was very inspiring, and your, I don't really want to stay up for 3 months. I don't think I have the capacity for that yet, but it was inspiring nonetheless. And I thank you.
Well, thank you. You used to hear this quotation a lot. This is a quotation from Ajahn Chah, which goes right to the point we're talking about. So you may have heard this before, but the story basically is one student comes to him and says, here I'm dealing with X, Y, and Z. What do you recommend that I do? And he says, well, do this. And then that student, this is in a monastery, that student talks with someone else with the same issue and says that he talked with Ajahn Chah and got different advice. So he goes back to Ajahn Chah and says, hey, you told me that for the problem I'm dealing with, I should do this. And for the exact same thing, you told him that he should do something else. What's going on? And he said, my job is to help you stay on the middle path. And so, I see one student walking down the road and they start veering off to the right and they're going to fall into the ditch on the right. And I tell them, we'll head back towards the center of the road. And then I see a student veering off to the left side of the road. And I tell them, well, go this way to get back into the center. Well, those are two different ways, but you end back up in the center. So, we really have to tailor the use of these tools and these skills to the situation we're in and our particular personality and our personal practice history, and know where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are. This little one day that we're going to do is entitled Living on the Other Side of Suffering, and it's basically about the progress of practice and how at a certain point we start moving into more satisfaction and peace and happiness than suffering, and how that happens and how you make that happen and how you frame it so that you're working to do that, so that you keep moving forward. So, okay. So listen, I want to thank everybody very much for attending tonight. Thank you for your attention. I always am, I just decided that I was going to use this experience I had. And if it helped people to hear it, I want them to hear it. And every time I do it, I wonder if I've gone too far, So if anything that I shared was a little too intense or self-indulgent or something, and I offended you, I apologize for that. And I hope that there's something in there that helps you. And may all of our individual efforts and our collective efforts contribute to the elimination of suffering and the grounds for the creation of some real satisfaction and peace and happiness for others in the world. So thank you.